I'm glad you're here with me. Follow this story all the way to the end and drop the city you're watching from in the comments. I love you so much. My name is Dorothy Callahan, and I am 67 years old. I live alone in a 2-bedroom house in Nashville, Tennessee, the same house where I raised my son from the time he was 4 days old. Last Saturday, I sat in the parking lot of a Wells Fargo branch and transferred $38,500 back into my own savings account. That was the money I had wired to my son 6 months ago, his down payment on a house where, as of 3 hours earlier, his wife had informed me in front of 40 guests that I had no business being there. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. That surprised me. After 31 years of running a catering kitchen hauling sheet pans, managing chaos, keeping my voice calm when everything was falling apart, maybe steadiness was just the thing my body did when the rest of me was breaking. Let me tell you how we got here. I started my catering business, Callahan's Kitchen, out of necessity, not ambition. My husband, Ray, passed from a sudden stroke when my son Michael was 11 years old. One morning, Ray kissed me on the cheek before his shift at the warehouse. And by 2 in the afternoon, he was gone. No warning, no goodbye, no plan B, just me. A 5th grader who cried every night for 6 months, and a mortgage that did not care about either of those things. I had been cooking for church events and neighborhood potlucks for years. People always told me I should charge for it. After Ray died, I finally believed them. I borrowed a commercial roasting pan, printed 200 flyers at the library for $11, and drove around Nashville putting them in mailboxes on a Tuesday afternoon while Michael sat in the back seat doing homework. By the end of that first year, I had catered 14 events. By the time Michael graduated high school, I had a lease on a real kitchen space and 3 part-time employees. I want to be clear about something, because it matters to everything that comes after. I did not build that business to become wealthy. I built it to keep my son fed, clothed, and enrolled in a school with a decent football program, because football was the one thing that helped him grieve his father without collapsing into himself. Every dollar I made went somewhere it needed to go. Michael's braces at 13, his ACT prep course, his first car, a used Honda Civic that I had detailed 3 times before I handed him the keys, his college tuition at the University of Tennessee, which scholarships covered halfway and I covered the rest. I am not telling you this to paint myself as a saint. I'm telling you because my son knew exactly where everything came from. He had watched me come home after midnight, smelling like roasted chicken and industrial dish soap for the majority of his childhood. He used to leave a glass of water on my nightstand without being asked. That boy knew, which made what happened so much harder to understand. Michael met Vanessa at a work conference in Atlanta 3 years ago. He called me that same weekend, practically breathless. "Mom, I met someone. She's incredible. You're going to love her." I had heard that kind of excitement in his voice exactly twice before. Once about a Labrador puppy he wanted at age 8, and once about a red-eye flight to see a concert in New York. This felt different, bigger. He brought her to Nashville 6 weeks later. We met at a restaurant downtown, not my house. I understood why neutral ground. First impression, no pressure. Vanessa was polished in the way that money and a strict upbringing produce. Beautiful, yes, but in a way that felt like work. Her posture was perfect. Her smile arrived exactly when it was supposed to, and left exactly when it was supposed to. She ordered sparkling water and barely touched it. Her parents, she explained, owned a real estate development firm in Charleston, South Carolina. Old money, new expansion. She had grown up summering somewhere, with a name I had to ask her to spell. She asked me politely what I did. And when I said catering, she tilted her head slightly and said, "Oh, how fun. Like events?" I said yes, events. Corporate lunches, weddings, retirement parties, church fundraisers. She nodded the way you nod at a child who has shown you a finger painting. After dinner, Michael walked her to her car and then came back to help me with my coat. "She's great, right?" he said. I told him she seemed very polished. He laughed like that was a compliment. I let him believe it was. What I noticed that night, and chose not to say out loud, because what mother wants to be that mother, was a moment near the end of dinner when Vanessa's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her entire body changed. Shoulders up, chin down, voice 2 registers higher. "Hi, Daddy." "Yes." "Of course." "I know." When she hung up, she was quiet for a moment before snapping her smile back into place. I recognized that particular kind of exhaustion. I had worn it myself in the years after Ray died, when I had to perform confidence I did not feel because a child needed to believe his mother had everything under control. I almost liked her in that moment. Almost. The first request for money came 8 months into their relationship. Michael called on a Thursday evening, his voice carrying that particular careful tone that I had learned over the years meant he was about to ask for something he knew he should not be asking for. Vanessa had found a condo in a good Nashville neighborhood. They wanted to put down an offer. The problem, he explained, was that Vanessa's parents had their capital tied up in a new development project and could not contribute right now. He needed $38,500 for the down payment. I want to stop here, because this is the part that confused my niece Claire when she found out about it later, and I suspect it might confuse you too. Why was I paying? Why wasn't Vanessa's wealthy family stepping up? Here is the answer, and I am not proud of how long I took to see it clearly. Vanessa's parents had initially disapproved of the relationship. Vanessa came from Charleston society, and Michael came from a single mother with a catering company in Tennessee. There had been conversations, arguments, I later learned, between Vanessa and her parents about whether Michael was the right fit. By the time those conversations resolved and her parents came around, Michael had already asked me for the down payment, already received it, and already wired it. Vanessa's parents chose to frame it afterward as something that had been taken care of, as if the source of the money were a minor administrative detail. I said yes because Michael was my son, and the money was sitting there, and I believed him when he said they would pay me back. That is the whole explanation. I was not naive. I was a mother, which is sometimes the same thing. I gave him the $38,500. I also gave him $4,200 for the first and last month's mortgage while they settled in, because he said the closing costs had run higher than expected, and $1,800 for a dining room table because Vanessa had found one that really made the space. And the one they had was Michael's old apartment table, which she felt was too casual for the home they were building together. I paid for a dining room table I had never sat at. Over the following months, I noticed I was learning about the house, primarily through Michael's Instagram posts. The new rug in the living room, the porch chairs, the kitchen backsplash, white subway tile, very clean, very sharp. Vanessa's mother had apparently flown up from Charleston twice to help with decorating decisions. I was not invited to either visit. When I asked Michael about it, he said it had been a last-minute thing, that I would have been bored anyway, that they were mostly just measuring. Mothers measure things differently than designers do. I also noticed that the phone calls were getting shorter. Michael was always just heading into something or just about to jump on a call. When we did talk, there was a careful quality to his answers, like a man choosing his words with someone else in the room. I mentioned Callahan's Kitchen once we had just signed a big contract with a hotel chain downtown, and he said, "That's great, Mom," in the voice people use when they have already moved on to the next thought. I kept a calendar of the calls. I am not sure why. Some part of me was tracking something without knowing what. Claire was the one who said it out loud. She was 22, the daughter of my younger sister, and she had a kind of clear-eyed honesty that comes before life. Teaches you to soften everything for the sake of other people's feelings. She was visiting Nashville for the weekend and helping me reorganize the storage unit behind the kitchen space when she picked up a folder I had left on a shelf. Catering invoice logs from the past year. Nothing important. But she looked at the folder and then looked at me. "Aunt Dorothy," she said, "you worked 58 hours last week. I saw it on your timesheet on the counter." "It was a busy week," I said. And you gave Michael almost $45,000 total this year." She was not accusing. She was just saying the number the way you say the number on a blood pressure reading. It is what it is. Look at it. I had not added it up that way. I had processed each request individually, in the moment, as its own thing. Hearing it as a sum was different. "He's going to pay it back," I said. Claire set the folder down carefully. "Has he said when?" I did not answer, because the honest answer was that the last time I had asked, Michael had said soon. "Mom, we're still getting settled," and I had let that be enough. The housewarming party was scheduled for the last Saturday in April. Michael called to invite me 3 weeks before, which felt like an afterthought even as he said all the right words. "We want you there. Obviously. You're the reason we have the place." He laughed when he said it, a little too quickly. I told him I would be there. I bought a new blouse, cream-colored with small buttons, and I brought 2 trays of my cornbread and a honey butter I had been perfecting for years, because that is what I do when I want to show up as myself. I arrived at 2:15 inches the afternoon, 15 minutes after the party started. There were already 30 people there, the kind of people who had driven up from Charleston or flown in from wherever the Whitfield family, Vanessa's family, maintained their connections. The house was beautiful, I will give it that. Everything in its place, everything intentional. There was a catered spread along the dining room table, and I recognized the serving trays. A firm I knew. Good reputation. Expensive. Vanessa greeted me at the door. Her smile was the exact temperature of late November air, not quite cold enough to prove anything, just cold enough to feel. "Dorothy," she said. Not Mom. Not even Mrs. Callahan. Just my name. The way you say the name of someone you have been briefed on. She took the cornbread trays and handed them to a young man in a black apron without looking at them. I watched him carry them somewhere toward the back of the house. I never saw them again. Michael came over and hugged me, and for a moment I had my son back. That particular warmth that is only ever in the arms of someone who has known you their whole life. Then Vanessa placed her hand on his arm and said something about a couple who had just arrived. And he turned, and he was gone again. I found a chair near the window and sat. I talked to a neighbor couple who lived 2 houses down and had no idea who I was. I talked to a young woman from Vanessa's office who asked me how I knew the hosts and seemed mildly confused when I said Michael was my son. I held a glass of white wine that I did not drink and watched my son work the room with the ease of someone who had learned to belong in spaces I had never been invited into. Vanessa's mother arrived late, around 3:30. Her name was Genevieve. She was tall, narrow-faced, wearing a jacket that I suspected cost more than my monthly utilities. She moved through the room like someone who expected space to clear ahead of her, and it did. I had met her once before, briefly, at Michael and Vanessa's engagement dinner 6 months earlier. She had shaken my hand with 3 fingers and said, "Charming to meet you." I had not found anything charming about it. She saw me sitting by the window and walked over. "Dorothy," she said, which seemed to be the only name they had for me in this family. "Are you enjoying yourself?" "Very much," I said. She looked at the untouched wine in my hand. "The catering is from Alara's. Have you tried their menu? Extraordinary. We use them for everything in Charleston. Though I understand you're in the food industry yourself. Something more local?" I said I ran a catering business, yes, had for 30 years. She tilted her head the way her daughter had tilted hers in that restaurant 3 years ago. "How lovely that you've kept busy through the years," she smiled. "It must be nice, having a hobby that pays." A hobby? 31 years of 4 in the morning kitchen runs. 31 years of chemical burns on my wrists from industrial cleaners and heat rash from standing in front of convection ovens in August. 31 years of building something from nothing, alone, after the man I loved died on a warehouse floor and left me with a child who needed everything, and a savings account that would last 6 months if I was careful. A hobby. I opened my mouth to respond, and that was when Michael walked up. He had heard the last part. I know he had, because he did that thing with his jaw he does when he is deciding whether or not to say something. He decided not to. "Mom," he said, and his voice had that careful quality again. "Can I talk to you for a second?" He led me through the kitchen and out to the side porch, away from the party. I thought, for one moment, that he was about to apologize, that he had finally seen it. I thought I was about to have my son back all the way. "Mom," he said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you not to take it the wrong way." I waited. Vanessa's parents are talking about investing in our next property, a bigger place, something we could actually grow into. And they're asking about our financial situation. You know, what we have, what we owe. He paused. I told them the down payment was a gift. "It wasn't a gift," I said. "You said you would pay me back." "I know." But he ran a hand across the back of his neck. "It would just be easier for the relationship with her family if we didn't bring up the specifics. If it looked like we handled it ourselves." I stared at my son, 40 years old that October, gray at his temples that I had thought made him look distinguished, standing on the porch of a house my savings had helped buy, asking me to disappear from the story of how he got it. "I see," I said. "You understand, right? It's just easier." I had heard those words before. Different mouth, same architecture. It's just easier. It's just for today. It's just one small thing. I had been hearing that sentence for 3 years and calling it love. "I understand," I said. I went back inside. I said goodbye to the neighbor couple. I looked once more for the cornbread trays and did not find them. I got my jacket from the front closet and said a general goodbye to the room, and Vanessa said, "So soon?" in a voice that suggested she had already stopped tracking whether I was there. At the door, Genevieve caught my eye across the room and raised her wine glass slightly in my direction. A small, polite dismissal dressed up as a toast. I drove out of the neighborhood. I pulled into the Wells Fargo parking lot 6 blocks away. I sat in the car for 11 minutes. Then I called my banker, a woman named Patricia, who had helped me restructure my business accounts twice over the years, and who knew exactly who I was and where every dollar of mine had come from. "Patricia," I said, "I need to initiate a transfer." She asked how much. I told her. She did not ask why. That is the thing about a woman who has handled your money for 20 years. She can hear the whole story in the number. $38,500 back into my account. Exactly what I had given him. I did not call Michael to tell him. I drove home, heated up leftover soup, and sat at my kitchen table. The house was quiet the way it only gets after you have made a decision you cannot unmake. My phone started ringing at 6:47 p.m. Michael's name, over and over, like a metronome. At 7:15, I answered, "Mom." His voice was something I had never heard before, not anger exactly, but the thing underneath anger. The bank called. "What did you do?" "I moved my money back into my account," I said. "That was Mom. That was for the house." "You can't just—" "I can," I said. "It was my money. You said you would pay it back. You didn't. And tonight you asked me to pretend I never gave it to you. So yes, Michael, I can." There was a long silence. I could hear Vanessa in the background, her voice low and sharp. I heard my name, or rather I heard his mother, which was what I had become in that house. "You're really going to do this?" he said. "Because of one conversation?" "Not because of one conversation," I said. "Because of 3 years of conversations. Because of a dining room table I bought and was never invited to sit at. Because of a house I helped purchase, where tonight your wife's mother called my career a hobby. Because of the cornbread I brought that never made it to the table." I paused. "Mostly because you stood on that porch and asked me to make myself smaller so her family would think more of you. You're being dramatic. I'm being accurate." He hung up. Vanessa called once. I did not answer. An unknown number called twice, possibly the bank following up on the transfer inquiry, possibly someone else. I let them all go to voicemail and went to bed at 9 o'clock. Claire called the next morning. She had heard through my sister. "Are you okay?" she asked first, before anything else. That is the thing about Claire. She always asks the right first question. I'm okay, I said, and I was surprised to find I meant it. What are you going to do today? I told her I was going to open Callahan's kitchen because we had a corporate lunch order for Tuesday that needed the prep work started. Then I was going to take a long walk around the park, 2 blocks from my house. Then I was going to call my friend Renee, who had been asking me to come to her book club for 4 months, and whom I had been turning down because something always seemed to need doing. That sounds exactly right, Claire said. The next few weeks were strange in the specific way that happens when you remove something from your life that had been taking up so much space you forgot it was weight and not furniture. I had more time. More money, obviously, but also just more time, more attention, more mental room. I had been spending a significant portion of my inner life managing anxiety about Michael, tracking the calls, softening my words, rehearsing how to bring up the repayment without making him uncomfortable. Without that constant low-level work, my mind had room it hadn't used in years. I went to Renee's book club. I started a Tuesday morning walking group with 2 women from my church. I took on a new catering contract with a corporate client, my biggest in 5 years. And I negotiated the terms with a clarity I had not felt in a long time, because I was not walking into that meeting tired from the previous night's worry. My sister called one evening and said Michael had reached out to her, looking for information, wanting to know if I was okay, or wanting to know what I was thinking. She could not quite tell. I told her to tell him I was fine, and that when he wanted to talk to me, he knew my number. He called on a Wednesday, 3 weeks after the party. His voice was different from the last call, stripped down, quieter. "Mom," he said, "can we meet?" We met at a diner near my kitchen space, a place I had been going since before Michael was born. Vinyl booths, bottomless coffee, a waitress named Shirley who had watched me come in at 6 a.m. for 30 years. I arrived first. I ordered coffee. When Michael came through the door, I saw what the past 3 weeks had cost him. He looked like a man who had not been sleeping well, which I recognized because I knew what that looked like on his face. I had spent 11 years watching it after his father died. He sat down across from me. He did not order anything. "I'm sorry," he said. Just that, right at the start. No preamble, no softening. I noticed that and filed it away as something. "Tell me what you're apologizing for," I said. Not unkindly. I just needed to know he knew. He looked at his hands. "For asking you to hide where the money came from. For letting Vanessa's family treat you like you were something to be managed. For the cornbread." He said that last one very quietly, and something in my chest moved. Of all the things he could have mentioned, the cornbread, because he understood what it meant. "Your grandmother's recipe," I said. "I know. Did it even get eaten?" He looked up at me. "I don't know. I looked for it later. I couldn't find it." Shirley came by with the coffee pot and refilled my cup without asking. I wrapped both hands around the mug. "Michael," I said, "when did you start being ashamed of where you came from?" He flinched. "I wasn't. You were." My voice was not angry. It was just true. "Somewhere in the last 3 years, you started seeing my kitchen as something to apologize for. You started calling the checks I wrote handled instead of given. You started letting people call your mother Dorothy instead of Mom." I looked at him. "When did that happen?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Vanessa's family has a way of making everything feel like a competition. And I was always losing. To who? To what she came from. To what they expected." He exhaled. "I thought if I could just get us to the right level, the right neighborhood, the right house, then the comparison would stop." I nodded. "And what am I in that competition?" He did not answer, but I saw the answer. "I was evidence," I said, "that you hadn't started high enough." He put his face in his hands. I let him sit there. Shirley brought a water glass she hadn't asked for and set it down without comment, which is the particular grace of a good diner waitress. After a while, I said, "I love you, Michael. That does not change." But I am not going to spend whatever years I have left making myself smaller so that you can feel bigger in a room full of people who will never actually be satisfied. I wrapped my fingers around my coffee mug. The money is back in my account. I'm not going to court over it, but I need you to understand that it represents something. And what it represents is that my contribution to your life was real. And it deserves to be real. Not a gift that gets quietly buried. He looked at me. I'll pay it back. That's not the point. I know. But I will. Every month. Whatever I can manage. He straightened in the booth. I want to pay it back. Not because you need it. Because I need to. I studied his face the way I used to study his face when he was small, and I was trying to tell the difference between a fever and a bad day. I thought I was seeing something true in him. I was not sure yet, but I thought I was. We'll see, I said. That was 4 months ago. I want to tell you where things stand. Because I believe you deserve to know how the story is actually being lived, rather than just how it ended in the dramatic moment. Michael and Vanessa are still together, which surprised me. But they are going to couples counseling, which surprised me more. He mentioned it on the phone one evening, casually, like it was just a thing they did now. And I did not make a production of it because I did not want to scare him away from saying it again. The woman he mentioned, the therapist, sounds like someone who does not let him get away with things. I appreciate that. He has transferred money to me every month since our diner meeting. Not large amounts, but consistent, and without being asked. There is a dignity in that kind of repayment that has nothing to do with the dollar amount. Vanessa has not called me. I have not called her. There is a middle distance. We are both maintaining, and for now, that is honest. Something built on false warmth is no foundation at all. If there is going to be a real relationship there, it will have to start from what is true. Not what is convenient. Genevieve, Vanessa's mother, sent a card. A paper card. In an envelope. With a Charleston return address. Inside, in her handwriting, was one sentence. I believe I owe you an apology. I have not responded yet. I am thinking about what I want to say, and I have decided I am allowed to take the time it needs. Claire started her junior year and told me she has decided on nursing. Because of you, she said on the phone. Not because you did it, because you didn't get to, and you never once made that feel like a wound. I cried for about 7 minutes after I hung up and then went back to packing a catering van, because life does not pause for the things that deserve to stop it. Callahan's Kitchen signed that corporate contract, and we have been running at full capacity since June. 2 weeks ago, Maria, my kitchen manager, told me I seemed lighter. I told her I had started sleeping better. She looked at me, the way women who have known you a long time look at you when they know the full story, and are choosing not to say all of it. Then she said, "Whatever you did, keep doing it. I am not going to tell you I have no regrets. I gave too much for too long to a version of my son that was slowly disappearing. And I called it love when part of it was fear. Fear of being without him. Fear of being the difficult one. Fear of the question every parent asks in the dark. If I stop giving, will they stop staying? Here is what I know now. At 67, in a house that is completely mine, with a catering business that has fed this city for 3 decades, and a calendar that finally has things on it, I chose. The fear does not go away when you set a limit. It just stops running your decisions. And a person who is not run by fear takes up a different kind of space in a room. A kind that does not shrink when someone raises an eyebrow. A kind that can carry cornbread into a housewarming party and know, regardless of whether it makes it to the table, that it was made with love, and that the love was real. Some things are true whether or not they get acknowledged. I built my son's life. I am not ashamed of how I built it. I am no longer willing to be the only one in the room who knows that. The morning after the bank transfer, I woke up very early, as I always do. I made coffee. I sat on my porch in the cool April air and listened to the neighborhood coming to life around me. A dog walking past, a kid on a bike, the city getting up and doing the thing it always does, indifferent and familiar. I thought about Ray. I thought about the woman I was at 26 with a newborn and no map and no one to call who could actually help. I thought about all the years between that woman and this one, the sheet pans and the invoices and the school plays I attended, smelling like rosemary chicken, and the moments my son looked at me with something I can only describe as pure, uncomplicated love before the world taught him to complicate it. I thought, I did not survive all of that to spend my last years invisible. My coffee went cold. I made a second cup. I went inside and got my notebook and started writing down the things I wanted to do before the year was out. Not a bucket list, not a catalog of regrets, just a list of things that sounded like me, a pottery class at the community center, a long weekend in Asheville, a proper lunch with Renee and the book club women, a new recipe I had been developing that I wanted to test at the next church fundraiser. A life, in other words. My life. The one that had been waiting patiently on the other side of my fear the whole time. Whatever you're carrying right now, whatever arrangement you've made with someone you love that asks you to be less so they can feel like more, I want you to hear this from a woman who has been there. You are allowed to put it down. You are allowed to say, very quietly, on a Tuesday morning in a parking lot or on a side porch at a party or wherever the moment finds you, that this is not what love looks like. And you know the difference because you have been practicing love your entire life. It is never too late to take up the space you were always supposed to fill. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment below and tell me, have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself? I read every single one. And if you've been here with me before, you know I'll be back in the comments with you. Subscribe and hit that notification bell because there are more stories coming, and every one of them is for you.